What's going on, everybody? It is that time again. The Sooners Illustrated Podcast, episode 169 on this Thursday, April 24th, 2025. Josh Callaway, Collin Kennedy with you on a Thursday. Transfer portal, that's where we're at. We have lots of portal updates. Oklahoma made an addition this week to bolster their defensive line. Collin and I will break it down. We'll also look at what's next. Updates on tight end in particular at a big visit this week. A new wide receiver offer and a pending visit. We'll hit on some other positions as well, both on the defensive side as well on the special teams unit. Some other updates to get into there. So a full transfer portal palooza show on a Thursday at that time of year as Oklahoma looks to continue to make some additions here. It's about to close the window. When does it close, Collin? Tomorrow?
Yep.
Next days, right?
Closing
Tomorrow.
Up. Mm-hmm.
So we're in the tail end of it as far as the movement. It's just going to be about, making the right additions, if you will. So,
Yes.
But transfer portal, we can keep it rolling. Lots of content over on Sooners Illustrated, Oklahoma.247sports.com, and more to come. But we do have a few things we want to talk about on the program today. People tuned in on YouTube, don't worry. Orange, I got an orange undershirt on. It's an OKC Thunder shirt. So
there you go.
Nobody jumped down my throat on that. I had that thought right before we started recording. It's a Thunder shirt. 2-0.
I mean, it's a good time of year to have the Thunder shirt on. So you're good. You're good.
Good vibes right now. Game 3 tonight. Keep it going. As far as Oklahoma Sooners football, which is what we're here to talk about, they did make another addition this week. They bolstered the defensive line, a guy we talked about on the Monday show, James and Tom and myself. Ricky Lolohea from Utah State comes aboard. He's a big boy, north of 300 pounds, depending on when you look, maybe even as high as 330. He's young, multiple years of eligibility. Talked about on Monday, obviously Utah State, the connection with Nate Dreiling. So a previous relationship there, which certainly doesn't help or doesn't hurt. Helps you kind of have an idea of what you're getting a little bit if you're Oklahoma, I'm sure. Collin, talk about what went into getting Lolohea, and if you can, kind of what does OU envision him as? Is he a rotational piece right away? Is he a more of a future addition? Kind of paint a picture on what Lolohea's addition means and what you kind of make of it as they got him into the boat this week.
The way that I look at this, honestly, is the good Lord did not put a whole lot of people on this planet who can play defensive tackle. But even further, God did not put a lot of people on this planet, a lot of bodies who can play nose tackle specifically. And I look at Ricky Lolohea as exactly that, as a long-term option who can play one of the more difficult, thankless positions in this beautiful sport, nose tackle spot. And I think that not only did Oklahoma recognize this, I think Nate Dreiling was a big proponent of this process and a supporter of this player. And I think in general, obviously, Oklahoma has talked a lot about, as this new staff has kind of taken over the program the last few years, the value of having multiple bodies along the defensive line who can play at a SEC caliber level. Now, I'm not sitting here telling you that that is Ricky Lolohea today, but he could absolutely be that in the years to come. And the good news is he does have that with 3 years of eligibility remaining. And on top of that, man, again, I think you're looking at this as someone who can come off the bench right now as your 5th option, 6th option, and at the very least be someone who can step into that nose tackle role at the 0 or 1, 2 gap, take on blockers, and help free up your playmakers in this defensive system. And again, not a lot of people can do that in this sport. That's why they are so highly coveted and valued. And I think that Oklahoma saw tremendous value in the form of Ricky Lolohea.
Yeah, I agree. I like the addition. I kind of mentioned on Monday, he just checks a lot of boxes. Good size, future years to work with. He's a Texas kid, so he kind of knows the area. He was at Oklahoma State before, if that matters at all. He kind of knows what he's getting when he comes to this state for him coming over from Utah State. They dryly knows him. It just kind of, at the very least, as a depth addition, makes a lot of sense. And like you said, you can't teach size. You can put on weight and things like that. That only so much, right? The guy's a behemoth, and at the very least, you like that. Just starting there, and so I like it. Again, you get David Stone back after all that. craziness, and we talked about it back in the winter, it's not a dire need, but you probably would like another D tackle, and when you got one here, that again kind of just seems to check a lot of boxes for what you kind of would be looking for. So I like the addition. It's not like a massive, it's not Dominic Williams, like he's not going to start, but it's a good pickup in my mind. So a nice addition here, and just one that seems to make a lot of sense. Certainly for Oklahoma, and probably for Lolohea too. You do at Oklahoma, get coached by Todd Bates. I mean, it's a good spot for him also. So just kind of seems to be a good partnership, and one that whenever it kind of when they extended the offer and you kind of looked at it, was like this looks like it would make a lot of sense, and they made it happen. So good pickup.
Yeah. I think it makes a lot of sense what you said. Lolohea had the opportunity to go to a place like Oklahoma and develop under someone like Todd Bates, work with someone who he likely trusts in Nate Dreiling. And I said this on the board, I would love to know what Dreiling had to say about Lolohea behind the scenes. And you have to assume that a big reason why someone like Lolohea is headed to Norman is because a vocal presence like Dreiling went to bat for him. Now, on the flip side, what I really like about Lolohea as well, I watched the tape a little bit. You see it, like the elements to be a very capable nose tackle type. Like it's all present. But on top of that, Josh, he appeared in 8 games last year. I saw somewhere that Dreiling, while he was serving as the interim head coach at Utah State, actually singled out Lolohea as someone who kind of earned his way into the rotation as the year went on, put in the work to do so. And then I believe he ended up playing those 8 games. Those were the 8 games to close out the year. So he essentially started 8 consecutive contests to conclude the 2024 season. So Utah State said, you know what? We got to get this guy in the game. And he didn't budge. He earned that opportunity to play. I think he had a really good performance, specifically right out of the gate against Boise State last year, Josh. And we know what that Boise State team was capable of a season ago. So he held his own from the jump, earned that right. And you feel like this guy is going to be someone who can do more of the same, especially when someone like Dreiling recognizes kind of those intangibles this player brings to the table.
No doubt. And this also kind of feels like one that it's going to be one of those kind of, Jim Nagy talent evaluation kind of guys.
Yeah.
Like Jaden Ott is like, obvious, right? I mean, he's going to be one of the best running backs in the sport. But Ricky Lolohea, like, is this a guy that Jim Nagy sees and identified as, hey, right coaching, right? Strength work, whatever it may be, can be a legitimate defensive tackle in the SEC. We won't know for a while, but it's kind of just one of those little like, okay, we get a little look at the Jim Nagy, the talent evaluator, a little bit with Lolohea. So nice pickup there, and one that just seemed to make a lot of sense. The other one that we mentioned on Monday was obviously at a position that has been heavily talked about for a long time, which is tight end. Missouri State's Lance Mason was in town earlier this week. He's pretty coveted. Tight ends that can produce and have good size are kind of hard to come by in the portal, and they're something that a lot of teams are chasing. Mason's been bouncing around everywhere. It seems like he's had a bunch of visits already. Collin, where are you at with Mason after his visit to Oklahoma? You had mentioned last week Gavin Hoffman. He has since committed to Missouri. It seems like and you correct me if I'm wrong, that kind of all their eggs are in the Lance Mason basket, at least right now, if they want to add a legitimate tight end. Where are they at with Lance here? As a guy we talked about on Monday, 6'4", was pretty productive last year, good size, good athlete. Where you kind of stand with him and Oklahoma's chances to bring him in?
Yeah, it feels like quite literally everybody's eyes are on Lance Mason right now. I can speak for us specifically. We literally delayed the recording of the show just to see if he would make his decision.
Sure.
It's getting to that time of the process, folks. Like Josh mentioned, he has been all over the place. Visits, if I remember correctly, to Cal, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, and Purdue. And I believe almost all in a row, like back to back to back to back, and have been speaking with his representation throughout the process. They have told me that once he wrapped up his visits to those 4 programs, I believe Purdue was the final trip on Wednesday. And I was told by Mason's agent that they were going to know, quote unquote, very shortly after that. Now, as we record this show at 2:08 p.m. on this Thursday, April 24th, I am looking at his X account and Instagram account, and I do not see anything to indicate that he has made a decision. Do I think one's coming soon? Absolutely. If this thing carries out much further, I would not only be shocked, but I'd be a little bit bummed because I would like to settle in and watch the draft and relax and move on to the kicker position, which we'll get to in a second.
Sure.
But I think Oklahoma still feels really good. I continued to talk with folks, and the visit that they had on Monday went very well. I think that the need at the tight end position in Norman was very well communicated to Lance Mason. Now, obviously, I'm not sitting here saying like they guaranteed him a starting role or anything. I don't want to be too hyperbolic, but look, there is a very real opportunity for Mason, if he were to choose Oklahoma, to step in and compete right away for a starting role in the SEC. The problem is, Josh, as you also know, a similar pitch, not of same conference, but a similar pitch can pretty much be put together for everyone else in this race. You know, Wisconsin lost Tanner Koziel, who's now off to Houston. Purdue has been making a lot of moves in this spring window. They're kind of open for business in a sense, and you would assume that he'd be able to compete with the Boilermakers right away. And then Cal lost Jack Endries, who was pretty much the top available tight end of the spring window, who was off to Texas. And so I think the Sooners are in good shape. Don't really know of a better way to put it right now as we kind of continue the great wait here. But again, at time of recording, OU is optimistic, and I believe that they have every reason to be exactly that.
Yeah, I've heard positive things as well. It just seems to, be another one kind of like Lolohea, just kind of makes sense. I would think, and I'm not speaking for Lance by any means, but I would think Ben Arbuckle offense, John Mateer, that'd be pretty attractive. And the tight end room is just wide open. I'm not going to pretend to really know the depth and what the talent situation is at Cal and Wisconsin. Obviously, like you said, we know that they lost their starting tight end, so that would certainly indicate that there's an opportunity there. But when you're looking at Oklahoma, the tight end depth chart, which has been, widely discussed, everyone knows, it's wide open. Yeah. I mean, there's guys that maybe could do something. I mean, we talked about Will Huggins had a nice camp. Carson Kent did some nice things. But, I mean, you're looking at guys. I mean, Will Huggins coming up from Pittsburgh State, right? I mean, Carson Kent's coming from Kennesaw State. Jaron Kanik is converted linebacker. Like, there's nobody there at all that you would say is a slam dunk favorite to win that job right now, even after spring, I would say. Yeah. So, you're stepping in if you're Lance Mason, feeling like, I would think, quite confident that you could go win a job. Now, you're behind the eight ball in terms of you weren't there for the spring, but it's there for the taking. So I would think it's pretty attractive. It sounds like both parties like where they sit with it. We'll see what happens. Like Collin said, we almost delayed the show. We considered halfway even bumping back to tomorrow for this. We said, this portal stuff, this is a dance that we do every spring and winter with, should we move shows around to accommodate announcements? And sometimes it works out. Sometimes it doesn't. But I think things sound like they're trending positively here for Lance Mason. It would be a nice gift for that room if that's the way it goes.
I think we've always kind of done that dance, and I will blame myself. I am the problem because I kind of have that PTSD after I was on the radio in OKC, and then John Mateer popped in the middle of my radio hit.
I was saying
about John Mateer.
Cheesesteak. I'll never forget that. I'm trying to get a cheesesteak at the mall, doing some last minute Christmas shopping, and then boom.
And then like my phone dies and Lolohea pops while I'm trying to get my charger together. And anyway, I did want to make this point to your point. Let's level with each other and let's level with the folks out there. Let's be objective. Like,
sure.
To your point, the tight end room is open at Oklahoma, right? No one really knows. And all those guys are being asked to make a difficult transition. It might not be the easiest transition for Mason himself either, right? I mean, at the end of the day, this is someone who's leaving Missouri State in the FCS ranks. And if he were to choose Oklahoma, like, he would be a starting tight end in the SEC. Like, I'm not sitting here trying to guarantee that He's an impact player right away, first day in Norman. But at the same time, you would feel a lot better about that group if you go and get a guy who was legitimately an all-American tight end in the FCS, one of the most productive tight ends in the nation at that level of ball, averaged, if I remember correctly, more than 17 yards per reception at the tight end position. Like, that's just kind of the skill set that you're missing. And so we can sit here and debate whether or not Lance Mason comes in, if any of them are able to effectively transition, whether or not he joins the fold or not. But at the very least, Mason has the elements that maybe some of those other guys don't have that would lead you to believe that he would be able to have a pretty strong level of contribution, especially in the passing game where they're kind of lacking in that group.
Yeah, the production was there. And like you said, it's a big jump, but that's something that is kind of honestly lacking in the rest of the room. That they were coming from lower levels. They also didn't really produce those lower levels. They're had good
Very
camps.
true.
They looked the part, in pads, but Lance Mason, again, at Missouri State, it's different than the SEC. We acknowledge that, but he has done it a little bit more. So we'll see how things are going there, but it certainly would be a good pickup if they were to do it. And if they do, we'll let you know. Or as soon as Illustrated, be sure to keep up with that. Also, you can turn on the newsletter so you get alerts and stuff like that, push alerts, text alerts, I guess is what I'm looking for all breaking news. Another little perk there for subscribers and things like that. So we'll let you know when we get there. Another position of need that we talked about a few times, wide receiver. One guy in particular I want to bring up. You were the first report earlier this week that McNeese wide receiver Jer'Michael Carter is going to be visiting town tomorrow. Oklahoma extended an offer to him earlier this week. Carter at McNeese last year, I had the stats pulled up, 37 grabs for 537 yards and 3 touchdowns. So had a nice year. He's a Louisiana product. He's 6'4", about 200 pounds, maybe a little less. Collin, talk about where they kind of envision Carter, what he would mean, how just kind of paint a full picture, I guess. He's another guy who's on the younger side. I don't know how many years eligibility, at least a couple, maybe 3, depending on his redshirt situation and things like that. But a younger guy that Oklahoma chasing, that would seem to be a nice kind of, again, depth addition to the room at the very least if they were to make it happen.
Yeah, look, Oklahoma has been specifically looking for a bigger body wide receiver who can play the perimeter and be a little bit of a chain mover and essentially just be a reliable target on first down in the red zone, give them that big perimeter threat that maybe they don't necessarily have right now. Giovanni Gibson can be that deep vertical threat. Isaiah Satania and Deion Burks in the slot, making plays, doing some layered stuff. But sometimes you just need a big dude who can be a wall, throw it at the dartboard or throw it up and let him jump up, make a play. And I think Jer'Michael Carter is exactly that. I want to give a shout out to one of our subscribers at Sooners Illustrated. Last day for 50% off, by the way, out there, folks, if you're interested in joining us. JTW 2213. Have to give a tip of the cap here because we were talking about Jer'Michael Carter on the board last night, myself and a few of the subscribers, just guys talking ball, and JTW 2213 brings this up. As you mentioned, 37 receptions, 37 yards, 537, 3 touchdowns, an average of 14.5 yards per reception. But to me, this is the number to know. He says, JTW 2213, that is, McNeese State threw for 2,234 yards. So Carter accounted for 24% of the team's passing yards on the season. He was the team's leading receiver in receptions, yards, and touchdowns, on top of being 24th percentile in total passing yards accounted for. That's nuts. I would go ahead and say that's pretty ridiculous to almost account for a quarter of the passing yards on the season. Carter is someone who has produced, and because of that, Josh, he is garnering a lot of interest. So, like you mentioned, we reported that he will visit Oklahoma on Friday, and he's going to take a number of other trips. We'll discuss that. But I would say the overarching headline right now is that on top of schools like Baylor, who he's already visited, Utah, I believe that trip's coming up. Vanderbilt is in the mix. Oklahoma offered, got the visit booked. And then the Tennessee Volunteers, they get in the mix as another big brand in the SEC on the hunt for a receiver. And the Vols not only extend an offer as well, it is expected that Jer'Michael will visit Knoxville on top of the other trips.
Sure.
And so here's why it's worth mentioning. At the time that Jer'Michael Carter booked that visit, I thought this has to be OU's guy, right? This has to be OU's guy. And then Tennessee comes to town, and if recent trends have told us anything, Oklahoma is not going to be willing to overspend on a receiver in this spring market, and totally understandable, by the way. But Tennessee, I give them a ton of props. They get aggressive, and we know that they have a tendency to, how do I put this? Inflate the market, inflate the number, if you will, when they like a player. And so whether it was maybe the likes of a Lance Hurd back in the day to now Jer'Michael Carter, we'll see. I mean, you never really know, but essentially OU getting ready to battle here along with the Tennessee Volunteers, Baylor Bears, Utah Utes, and Vanderbilt Commodores. Again, Carter, one of the more coveted remaining pass catchers available for a reason, so we'll see what the Sooners do here. They'll bring him into Norman on Friday.
Yeah, I would like to pick up 6'4", like you mentioned, size. That's really what jumps out to me. Because you kind of look at this wide receiver room, and you're not hurting for size, but you could use some more. Jaden Gibson is your biggest guy. We don't know where he's at health-wise. Obviously 6'5". We don't know where he's at. Ivan Carrion is 6'6", who had a nice bowl game, but obviously, you're still kind of, is he ready to make that next step to being a big-time contributor? I don't know. We'll see. Maybe. Again, had a nice bowl game in Fort Worth against Navy. After that, he would be your biggest guy at 6'4". Manny Choice, I think, also listed at 6'4". Obviously a true freshman, but other than that, I mean, Javonte Gibson 6'2". Where's his health? Elijah Thomas a little over 6 foot. I mean, Jer'Michael Carter would come in and immediately be one of your bigger body wideouts on the team. So, just for that alone, I would like it because, like you said, you feel good about, I think, your slot guys, Deion Burks, Isaiah Satania, some of these other dudes that they have that are certainly exciting in that wide receiver room. So, it just, we'll see how it shakes out. Like you said, if Tennessee really wants someone, to your point, they can, make things happen. They just had some money freed up. I believe. I think a star quarterback moved on, if I'm not mistaken. So
what happened there? I don't.
Yeah, they might have some money to spend. Put it that way. We'll see, though. We'll see. And, we'll keep an eye on this one. He comes into town tomorrow, Friday. And, again, a hat tip to Collin, first to report that Carter would be coming into town tomorrow. So we'll keep an eye on that visit throughout the weekend. And also we'll check in on that certainly on the show next week as well.
Yeah, I just want to mention, too, I will say this as well. Now that it popped in my head, you made a good point. Little budgetary spending available out there in Knoxville, but now that they have Joey Aguilar coming in from UCLA, you would have to assume, especially after losing a couple of guys at the receiver spot to the NFL draft, Dante Thornton, who scored in Norman on that, I believe it was a skinny post or deep post, I can't remember exactly. Some of those guys in Tennessee left for the draft, have a new quarterback, obviously have money to spend, but they need to surround their new signal caller with receiving threats, and so you would assume they get aggressive here. I wanted to kind of round it out by saying I know that there will be some folks out there who are curious about maybe a couple other receiver names. We've done a lot of reporting on other receiver targets as well, and wanted to mention Mark Hamper, the former receiver out of Idaho who stopped at Wisconsin and then hopped back in the portal for the spring. We've done a lot of reporting on him for our subscribers. So, again, 50% off. Today's the last day. But basically, this is someone who Oklahoma has been in contact with, and we actually reported that they reached back out to Hamper on Wednesday, talked to his camp, but nothing had been booked. And so the ball is in OU's court there if something were to happen with Carter. And then I know that folks ask about BYU receiver and kick returner Keelan Marion. I mean, I told our subscribers right away, like, if you're curious, I don't see that being an option for Oklahoma still.
Sure.
It's kind of where we're at with the receiver stuff. And I wanted to close by saying, look, if they lose out on Carter, I wouldn't be shocked if they just go, you know what? We like those freshmen. We think that Giovanni Gibson's going to play. Jaden Gibson's, if he sticks around, like, let's roll with the guys we got. That wouldn't shock me if we get to the end of this saga and they end up going that direction.
Right. Well, we'll see. It's interesting. We thought, basically guaranteed that they would add a wideout, in this post-portal window. But that was kind of before, it sounded a little more optimistic on Giovanni Gibson, injury-wise. So I don't know. We'll keep an eye on it. Jer'Michael Carter certainly seems like one that would make sense. But, we'll see as they battle with Tennessee and, like Collin said, Vanderbilt in the mix there too. It's kind of funny too, going back to the Joey Aguilar, Nico Iamaleava trade, as people were calling it, the first ever quarterback trade. Did people just forget about Kyler Murray, Trevor Knight? I think we had a quarterback trade before around here, but I digress.
That's quite recall. I hadn't even thought of that. Good job.
That was the first real quarterback trade right there. And I think I'm going to go ahead and say, you got the better end of that one. Some other portal updates. We'll start going back over the defensive side. In the secondary, defensive backs, corners in particular, you've been reporting on some names floating around here. This is a position in the secondary, specifically, again, corners, that we had talked about a little bit back in the, in the winter and even throughout spring. Could they look to add someone here? I think you like your talent in that room, but there's some injury history, certainly Gentry Williams and guys like that, and you lost some veterans, Des Malone and Woody Washington. Where are you kind of at with Oklahoma in the secondary, in that cornerback room, potentially adding a body here before this spring cycle is over? What are some names you're watching, and I guess the likelihood that they do add someone?
So it's really interesting because I think when the spring window started, I mean, let's back up even further. I think when the winter window ended, I was like, yeah, they're going to get a corner. And I had heard that corner was on the table for the spring. And then as time went on and further examination of that room went on, and the fan base did the same thing, we're doing, and they're evaluating what's in Norman right now, it kind of felt like everyone came to the consensus like, hey, corner, you need to go get a guy, right? Sure. And I think right now, as we sit here on this Thursday afternoon, it's like Oklahoma's pretty much said, I mean, no, not really. And like, it's a little bit shocking because, like you mentioned, I've brought up a couple of names for our subscribers that Oklahoma has reached out to, touched base with, from the Jalen McClendons out of Tennessee State. Really fun player, by the way. Was nominated for FCS Defensive Player of the Year a season ago. Jaden Williams from Texas Southern, who started his career at USC. He's in the portal. They're making some calls. I know that another name that has garnered a lot of social media interest right now is Brian Nelson II out of North Texas, just north of me in Denton. But I don't think that a lot of steam there has garnered from Oklahoma just yet. We'll see if that changes. I'm scheduled to make a couple more phone calls this afternoon, so hopefully we have some more for the board. But essentially what I'm trying to say is, look, don't be surprised if Oklahoma, when everything is said and done, wraps it up without a cornerback ad, because I think they're looking at that group saying, look, if we can get Gentry Williams to be healthy and we can have Eli Bowen ready to go, and we have someone who we believe can be a starting caliber player in Jacoby Johnson, And then we have these young guys who we really like.
A lot of young guys. Yeah.
Yeah. The Cortland Guillory's, the Jeremiah Newcombs, the Devin Jordans.
Malik Hawkins maybe in there.
Yeah. And so I think that they're looking at it and they're saying, unless we see a verified stud, a tried and true SEC caliber starter at the cornerback spot. And I feel it's important to mention, by the way, folks, because I've had a couple people ask me about this. They can't add SEC players, right? So like if you see like a corner who's from the SEC, they can't go get him unless that guy doesn't want to play this year. So yeah, man, I think this is basically something where they're kind of getting to the finish line and they're surveying the market. They're looking at the talent available and they're playing it patiently because, to be quite frank, I don't think that they have 100% conviction on the idea that the guys that are out there are 100% better than the young guys' outlook that they already have in that room. So, like, where are you at with this? Would you go get a corner? Where are you at with this stuff? Because I think this is kind of one of those debatable topics, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I would like one, but there's got to be a guy, right? We always kind of say that, like, go get this, but there has to be one, in the portal that, makes sense, that wants to play for you. Obviously, right? It's not just a given, like you just could get anything you want. We talk about that all the time with like offensive linemen and things like they have to be in the portal to get, I would like one, I really like the top end talent of the room. I love Gentry Williams, the player. But, he has had a hard time staying on the field. I mean, anyone would tell you that. So I just don't know, just relying on him, banking on him feels treacherous to me. A guy, he's just had a hard time. He just, had the injury bug has bit him. I hope for all the world that he can stay healthy for him, because he's an NFL player to me, if he can stay healthy. But that's, something that we just haven't seen. Obviously, I love Eli Bowen, Jacoby Johnson. You hope he can make another step. But I think if you don't add, you're putting a lot on the young guys for at least one or two of them to step up. Now, you have a bunch. You mentioned Jordan, Cortland Guillory, Malik Hawkins, Newcomb, maybe even Tristan Haynes, a true freshman. I don't know. I mean, Eli Bowen did it, as a true freshman, so why not? You would need someone there. Kendall Dolby is a weird one for me too. Like, could he play corner if you needed him to? Maybe. I don't know. I know they like him as a cheetah, but, if it came to it, well, could you? So I don't know. And then any of those safeties, would you consider any of those safeties as an option if needed? I don't know. That's up for them to determine if they feel like they need it as the season goes on. How much of an insurance policy do you have if in the middle of the season, Gentry's hurt again and Eli Bowen's out for a weekend, are you just like crap? Or you feel like you can handle that? Because if you feel like you can't handle that, then I would add one. So that's what you have to kind of ask yourself right now if you're Brent Venables and Jay Valai and that defensive staff right now. So I don't know. That's where I'm kind of at with it. We'll see how it shakes out. But any other thoughts on corners, defensive backs?
I think that's about it. And
we'll see. We shall see.
Yeah. I wonder if this is going to be a moment we look back on for better or for worse.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. I mean, hey, all this could be a moot point if they go and get somebody.
Sure. Easily could. The right guy could come along at the right price, and then boom, they make it happen. That could easily happen.
I'll be honest. Like, I watch, obviously, like I live just outside of Denton, Texas, for example, and Brian Nelson, the UNT corner, he hit the portal. What was that? Last night. I haven't been able to sit down and like watch the tape cut up, but I saw a couple games last year. He made a lot of plays. He's a younger guy. I wouldn't blame OU if they went after him. And that's still a developing situation. Maybe they do end up picking up the phone and calling one of these guys that we've been mentioning on the board. It's kind of like, I feel like we would know by now, right?
Yeah, fair. Yeah.
So, very curious to see if we look back on this in the fall. Very fascinated by this dynamic and curious to hear what the fans think as well. So,
no doubt. One last thing before we let you go. Let's look at kicker a little bit. We talked about Mason Shipley last week. Texas State kickers seem to be a logical addition if they could make it. He has since gone to Texas. which is a little bit of a kick to the stomach a little bit. The fact that the guy that you kind of identified as maybe being your guy, and he ends up going to Texas of all places. So, Collin, we talked about it. They really probably need to and should add a kicker. The kicking game is a major question mark right now. And Brent Venables admitted that himself after the Crimson Combine of kind of like, yeah, we need to improve the kicking game. Obviously, both the primary kickers from last year are gone. Where are they pivoting to in the kicking situation? I know you have one name in particular that you're pretty keen on as a possibility. Where do you think that they might turn for Doug Deacon and that special teams unit?
Yeah, we've mentioned like one other kicker name on the board that I felt was worth bringing up, but now I'm not even necessarily sure that like that guy is worth mentioning on the show. And so the name for me for OU to know is Tate Sandell, the former UTSA kicker, out of PNG High School down here in Texas, very, very south of me, but I have watched my fair share of PNG games. So shout out to PNG. So Tate Sandell is a place kicker from the UTSA Roadrunners who was an honorable mention in the American last year, made 19 of his 23 field goal attempts a season ago. And I believe he also held the kickoff duties for the Roadrunners. I have some folks that I know at UTSA. It's a program that the staff over there has always been good to me. Made a couple calls, and they have a lot of respect for this guy. I don't think that there's a lot of surprise down here in the state of Texas that this individual is potentially going to land at a higher level. And it sounds like Oklahoma could certainly be the landing spot. He went into the portal, I want to say yesterday afternoon. Obviously, it didn't take long after that for it to come together and be like, hey, Oklahoma is going to pick up the phone. And I believe he is visiting Norman today. I want to make sure I give credit. I believe that I saw George Stoya of Sooner Scoop put out that report first. I've since confirmed that Tate Sandell is visiting, and this one's moving quickly. Now, I want to mention 6 hours ago, Tate reported a offer from Colorado State. So, hefty competition. Not trying to slight Colorado State, but if Oklahoma identifies Tate as their guy, and he's on campus today, you would think / hope they get this ironed out stat. You know what I mean? Because
no doubt,
if this doesn't work out, I don't know what we're gonna do. I don't know what we're talking about here. I don't know how many more phone calls I can make on the kicker front, right? So
it's been kind of harder than tougher sledding than you would think.
It's crazy. Like I don't, to kind of pull the curtain back. It's like I'd be lying if I told you that I have invested a ton of time in the kicker realm. I had a really good source to me back in the day who worked at Louisiana Monroe, who kind of was just like my go-to guy on that stuff. And since I have really had to grow up in the kicker market, and I'm ready to be done. I'm ready to retire. So we'll see how Tate Sandell likes his time in Norman, and expect maybe an update on this one relatively soon.
They need to add one. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. They need to add one. It's a weak spot, and it's a weak spot that can cost you games. And OU knows that well. It's happened a few times on Brent Venables that just a missed kick here and missed kick there. As many close games as they play, you got to shore it up. You got to bring in at least another body, and hopefully that's their guy. But we'll let you know. We'll keep you updated over at Sooners Illustrated as the updates come in on their pursuits for kicker. Before we go, I think we're just about finished up here. I just want to ask you real quick, and you don't have to go real in-depth about it. Just in general, though, are you surprised there hasn't been more movement the other way, that more guys haven't left? Because it's kind of surprised me.
That's a good marker, Good. This is why you're the professional. That is.
I feel like that's something that not that, again, we said it before the window even opened. We did not expect a mass exodus by any means. That was not the expectation, but it's been very little movement out for Oklahoma. A couple guys, Sam Franklin, Josh Isosa, who ended up at West Virginia today. Is that it for scholarship guys? I mean, it's pretty low on the guys going out. And again, not that we expected a bunch of guys to leave, but you would have thought someone probably in that running back room, maybe, or maybe someone in that tight end room, maybe even, it's like there just hasn't really been, and there still could be, the window's still open, but it's kind of wild a little bit how little in terms of departures there have been.
So our Tom Green, who does a great job with the spring or the transfer portal window trackers that we put out.
Yeah.
He basically goes in and not only does he link for OU fans who are on our site, every single story or development that goes out in relation to Oklahoma, he puts in who's leaving, who's coming in, and then the active roster math as time goes on, which I feel is very important.
Mm-hmm.
So to your point, as of April 22nd, whenever they landed Lolohea, their roster spots filled are at 106. They've got to get to 105. They've got to get to 105, and they are looking at adding up to 3 more players, right?
Yeah.
So something's got to give, right?
Yeah, right. It's like this OU it's how it feels like. Are they aware that they are over the limit and they're continuing to add? It's like guys got to leave.
Okay, I love talking with our subscribers, like just getting to talk ball with folks and OU fans out there during our VIP chats on Wednesdays. And someone asked me last night. They go, "Hey, if OU weren't to follow the 105 rule, like what would happen?" And I genuinely sat there staring at the screen and was like, I don't know. I don't know. Are there any rules anymore? Like,
I don't know.
I don't know. I started laughing because, like, I'm sitting there. I'm like, I genuinely don't know if any rules enforceable anymore. And like Tom Green hops in the chat with a very professional answer on Brandon, the idiot that I am. I was like, can you even do anything in college football anymore? So yeah. Like, look, that the portal is closing.
It's weird.
The portal closes on the 25th. Like, we're done. You got to be in. Now, that's not to say that kind of like trade deadline style that some paperwork will get processed and maybe some names will finally appear after the fact because you can begin the process. But it's like we're not done. We're not done by any stretch, folks. So I'm very glad you bring that up because it is very important to acknowledge, like, for all the talk about who might come in, like, Oklahoma's not done sending people out, and it's nuts how all of this is working right now.
It's been weird. It's been weird because it's just, there's been some names floating that we've kind of been waiting on. It's like, well, dang, the window's about to close. And so I don't know. We'll see. We'll keep an eye on it. I mean, like we said, they're over by 1 right now, and they're looking to add a few more. So you have to. I mean, you have to. You have to shed some guys. So there will be departures, I assume, unless they just decide to go rogue and just say, what are you going to do about it to the NCAA? But I don't know. It's a wild, kind of a funny thing that is kind of the elephant in the room throughout this whole process of, like, they're still over the limit and they are looking to add more. So it's kind of it's an unusual spot.
Dude, Gundy, whenever Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State got asked about, like, the spring game scrimmage between them and Colorado and like the NCAA said, no, you can't do it. And Gundy goes, be honest with me. Could they do anything? Can you do anything? Like, would they be able to do anything?
Yeah.
It's genuinely changed the way of thinking for me. Like, can they do anything? I genuinely don't know. Like, what rules can we enforce? I have no idea. So
it's like, could they fine the school? But then it's like, what if they don't pay it? It's like, it goes, it's a never ending Yeah. I don't know. NCAA is teetering.
What is it called? Herd immunity? Or you know what the word I'm looking for?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's just nuts how all this has transpired. So
no doubt.
Last thing on my end, you mentioned one more thing of very professional nature, something a little bit less. But hey, it's draft season. Happy NFL Draft Day to all those out there. Danny Stutzman, Billy Bowman, Ethan Downs. Like I'm sure you guys will be recapping where they land on the Monday show.
Probably so.
What do we think? Like, give me a little OU in the draft thought, and then maybe I know you're a Falcons guy. I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan. I cannot wait for them to disappoint me this evening. Give me some OU or some draft takes, Coach. Let's hear it.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of been talking about this last few days. I feel like I've gotten, as time has gone on, less and less invested in draft. I don't know why that would be. I don't know. It just seems like each passing year, it's like it becomes more and more like, oh, that's this week. Like it kind of sneaks up on me more and more every year. Like, so we'll have coverage following where you guys land on the site, and we'll probably recap it a little bit on Monday. I'm guessing on the podcast. I'm curious just to see how high, Danny and Billy go, probably more than anything. There was a time where Danny was looked at as potentially a first rounder. That's not going to happen. But, where does he land? Can he get in the right spot? And I think Billy Bowman's going to probably wind up being a steal for someone. I mean, he's just so physical and such a smart football player. I think Billy Bowman, I don't know, I haven't looked at enough mock drafts to know like what's actually realistic for him, where he might land. I think like third, fourth round, maybe later. I don't know. I think he has a chance to be a steal for someone though. Like they're going to get a really solid football player, in the middle of the draft. And then for Danny, it's just like, again, I think he'll be a very solid NFL linebacker, and it's just a matter of, can he get in the right spot for him, to really get him to develop to the best of his abilities. But I'm just curious where those guys land, probably more than anything.
Yeah, I will say that it has been cool that the East-West Shrine Bowl has been moved to the Dallas area in my neck of the woods. And so now the NFL has like a premier draft showcase in football USA, if you will, the Hollywood of football, as I call Dallas, Texas. And, it's been cool being able to talk to some more NFL folks over the last couple of years. And I will tell you this. I think Danny Stutzman has been a known commodity. You would obviously assume day 2, day 3. Ethan Downs, day 3 guy. I was bummed that he ended up getting sick at the Shrine Bowl because I thought he would have certainly helped himself. But tell you what, man, Billy Bowman, like I think he really did himself some favors. And I have heard a lot of draft crushes behind the scenes about Billy. So excited to see where he lands, man, because I think he's the Oklahoma guy that arguably helped himself the most ahead of Thursday.
And it was fun, too. I mean, even the guys who don't get drafted, who will likely get signed somewhere, and they'll get an opportunity. You think of like DeJoun Terry, I imagine probably fall into that boat. Luke Elzinga, who is obviously a great punter. Punters don't get drafted very often, but I would imagine he would get a camp invite somewhere. So
Elzinga was at East-West Shrine Bowl. People forget that. Elzinga got the invite to the showcase. Yeah.
Right. So, always fun to see these guys that you cover for a long time, especially guys like Danny and Billy and Ethan, who are at OU for several years. Now I got the chance to cover their whole careers. I think I distinctly remember, covering them as freshmen when they first got there. And so it's kind of cool, to see them get to the NFL. That's cool. So be pulling for all those guys to land in good spots, and we'll keep an eye on that. And we'll have coverage on the site if you keep up with where the guys land. But then also, we'll probably recap it a little bit on Monday, kind of what we think about where they wound up as well. So happy draft to all those guys, and wish them the best of luck for sure. I think that's it. Again, lots of portal coverage over at Sooners Illustrated, Oklahoma.247sports.com. That's where you can subscribe, become a VIP member, keep up with all the portal content, and obviously all the spring sports content as well. Getting down to the home stretch of the Diamond Sports, so it's a really fun time of year for those two teams. Lots of coverage there, and have the game threads. So it was a fun way to kind of watch the games throughout the season. So head on over there and subscribe, be along with the summer and into next season, which will be here before you know it. Deion Burks, I think, tweeted yesterday, 129 days. So obviously today would be 128. And that kind of makes it. It's like, it is kind of it's only April, so I'm not getting ridiculous, but it is kind of like, man, it's a little, it's close. It's kind of, it's out there. Like the fall camp and the season, it's out there a little bit. You can see it. If you're driving, you can kind of vaguely see it out there. So it'll be before you know it. But
we got to get through the dog days of summer. Don't forget about that trek, where I'm watching Rangers baseball and then just dreaming of college football, and it's like,
the NFL announced like the Hall of Fame game date yesterday, the day before, and I was like, whoa, like we got the date for the Hall of Fame game. Like, it's like, okay, it's still a ways out there, don't get me wrong, but we're kind of getting, it's almost May, like, we're getting there a little by little. That's it for now. Be back next week on Monday with James and Tom, recapping everything, the portal, Diamond Sports, NFL draft, all that good stuff. Back with Collin later next week to put maybe finishing touches on the portal. We'll see. There might be a little
hope so. Good God.
We'll see.
I hope so.
Probably wrap up the portal a little bit next week and look ahead, obviously, to some recruiting stuff coming up into the spring and summer. That's it for Collin Kennedy. I'm Josh Callaway signing off. We'll see you next time right back here on the Sooners Illustrated podcast.